Hey there, it's Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. The Eye on College Basketball Podcast is presented by Jersey Mike's Sub. Jersey Mike's, a sub above. Needless to say, Matt Norlander is here with me. He's at home in Connecticut. I'm in a hotel room in New York City. If you're watching on YouTube, smash the like button like you're Brandon Davies. You have consent. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel, please knock that out while you're here. Let's get into it. The first bracket reveal from the official NCAA Tournament Selection Committee. It happened today. Hopefully you watched it on CBS. It's America's most watched network of stars. The number one seeds are Alabama, Houston, Purdue, and Kansas. And those are the same four schools that are 1, 2, 3, and 4 in my top 25 and 1. So no surprise there. In fact, 15 of the selection committee's top 16 were in the top 16 of this morning's top 25 and 1. The only difference, I have Miami in my top 16. The selection committee does not. Instead, the selection committee has Indiana. I don't have the Hoosiers. I actually have Indiana 20th in the top 25 and 1 right now. Dead leg. What's your biggest takeaway from the first bracket reveal of the season?
I think it's Indiana, 13th overall. It's the highest ranked 4 seed that we got here. I did a quick interview for CBS Sports HQ with Chris Reynolds about a few of these topics. We touched on a couple things here. One, there was no other team in contention for the 1 seed. It was those 4. He didn't outright say that Bama beating Houston was the definitive clincher, but it was a major factor in getting to that point. If you are watching, you can see right here, so you can get an idea of the South, the Midwest, the West, and the East, the teams that would go right now, and then the corresponding seeds with that. You will also notice 5 Big 12 teams, not in the top 16, in the top 12. Okay, you've got Kansas as a 1 seed, then you've got Texas on the 2 line, you've got Baylor on the 2 line, you've got Iowa State on the 3, and that is absolutely a consequence of what they've been able to do on the top end of the schedule. I want to get to that in just a second here. And then you've got K-State on the 12. And K-State as a 12, Indiana as a 13 is surprising to me, and that's not even considering GP as we do this live. I mean, you've got Illinois still winning at Indiana. I don't really know how you justify Indiana that high.
Yeah, I know, but let's be clear about something. What is happening with Indiana right now has nothing to do with this. So here's the thing. I don't think Indiana should be in the top 16 based on what Indiana has done up until this morning. Indiana wins this game, loses this game. It has no impact on what the bracket reveal should show.
I agree with that. It's completely irrelevant, but these things will age quickly. That one will age extremely quickly and not that well if Indiana does lose at home to an Illinois team that isn't at full strength right now. K-State as the 12 overall seed and on the 3 line out there in the West is certainly intriguing to me. The teams that didn't make it, and I did ask Reynolds this. So on the broadcast, he said Creighton, Miami, St. Mary's, UConn. If you look closely at that is alphabetical order. Creighton C, Miami M, St. Mary's S, and UConn U. I asked him if that was the exact order. He said it was not, and they didn't put a specific order on it. But those were the only other 4 teams that were considered for the 4 line. UConn not breaking in is certainly intriguing. When you consider the strength of UConn's overall resume and when you consider what it's been able to do. I mean, UConn has wins over it has a win over Bama, the number 1 overall seed. It's got the win over Iowa State and has a win over Marquette. It's been beaten 3 of those teams by double digits definitively. I don't have a huge issue with that because, as you and I have often agreed on, the losses have to count. They have to mean something. UConn is 19-7. I would have UConn in this top 16. I think it would come down for me probably UConn, Miami. K-State at 12 just seems high to me, GP, frankly. It just seems a little high overall. But I don't have any huge gripes. We're doing a quickie pod. We're giving you a little something on a Saturday. Those are my initial thoughts as we are literally like less than an hour after looking at this thing. What about you?
Every year this happens, and every year I say more or less what you just said, which is I don't have any major gripes because it lines up every year pretty well, if not entirely, with the top 25 and 1. I spend 3 months ranking 26 teams every single morning, and every single morning get called an idiot, and many other worse things. And then the bracket reveal comes out, and it's like the selection committee. I want to be clear. I don't mean they're copying me. That's not what I mean at all. But what they end up publishing looks like a copy on some level of the top 25 and 1, with very few exceptions. Again, this time, 15 of their top 16 is in the top 16 of my top 25 and 1. The only difference being Indiana. And this is where, when I miss on this stuff, this is where I always miss. It has to do with, I care about the loss column more than the selection committee cares about the loss column. I'll take it a step further. I tend to care about the loss column more than AP voters tend to care about the loss column. And so I wouldn't have Indiana in because it's a lot of losses. You know, Indiana's 5-7 in quadrant 1, 3-1 in quadrant 2. So the Hoosiers are 8-8 in the first 2 quadrants with 0 additional losses. Now, it's nice that they don't have anything bad in quadrant 3, anything bad in quadrant 4. They only have 1 quadrant 2 loss, but 500 in the first 2 quadrants gets you into the top 16. Like, again, we're splitting hairs a little bit here. I would have Indiana a 5 seed instead of a 4, right? So it's not that big of a difference. But
it's the best 4, just so we're clear.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a stretch for me. Whereas the team that I would have in instead of Indiana is Miami. Like I said, Miami is 6-4 in quadrant 1 and 3-0 in quadrant 2. So 9-4 in the first 2 quadrants. Again, Indiana is 8-8 in the first 2 quadrants. Miami is 9-4 in the first 2 quadrants. Indiana's 500 and Miami is 5 games above 500. And Miami has more quadrant 1 wins than Miami. The only difference here is that Miami does have a quadrant 3 loss at Georgia Tech. Indiana does not have any quadrant 3 losses. But I would rank higher a team that's 9-4 in the first 2 quadrants with 1 quadrant 3 loss than a team that's only 8-8 in the first 2 quadrants, even if that other team doesn't have anything bad in quadrant 3 or quadrant 4. I think Miami should be in, Indiana out, but it's a small quibble.
There is going to be inconsistency with some of this stuff because the committee is now 12 people. It used to be 10. This is the second year of it being 12 people. And frankly, you might have 7 people that apply their own philosophy to this one way, 5 people that applied another for one team, and then it flips. And those, the 7 that had it on that one team might do something different. The reason why I bring this up is specifically, even just like quickly diving in the minutia. Arizona is 6, UCLA is 8 overall. UCLA has a very intriguing resume. And I did ask Reynolds about this. And I said, listen, why is Arizona 6 and UCLA 8 when you consider Arizona has certainly more troubling losses overall, and Arizona is 6-2 in quad 1. It has 1 quad 3 loss, right? UCLA has no bad losses. All the losses are inside of quad 1, but it doesn't have as many. It's 4-4 in quad 1. So you're really splitting interpretations on this, and right or wrong, Reynolds mentioned a few things, but one of them that popped out to me was how Arizona was able to schedule in a non-conference. I would quibble with that specifically in terms of, I think the resumes are close enough here. When you look at how they did Arizona and UCLA, and then you look at how some other teams might have been a little bit lower or a little bit higher, there's just going to be some inconsistencies. Not the worst thing in the world. They mostly got it right. Some of these teams will fall out of the top 16. If you're curious about how much went into this, just a quick little background. I talked to Chris about this. He said they put about 22 hours worth of work into these top 16 this week. And again, 20 teams were discussed.
Which is, by the way, wildly unnecessary. I do this stuff in 45 minutes every day, get the same results.
I'm just giving you the data that was given to me. And
I know, but that's ridiculous.
And so how about this though? We got 5 Big 12 teams in the top 12 now, because if you have a conference with 4 of them, if you're looking right now, if you're watching, you'll see, what do we got? We got Baylor out in the South. You go over to the Midwest, you got Texas on the 2 line. You go down to the East, you've got Iowa State on the 3 line, and then you go out West, and you've got Kansas State on the 1, Kansas on the 1, K-State on the 3. For all those teams, they need to go to different regions. That's part of it. They got 5, and you can't have the rematch happen prior to the Elite 8. So that's why Kansas State, first of all, would never be a 2, but it couldn't be on the 4, because then a 1 versus 4 could happen in the Sweet 16. Kansas and Kansas State could wind up playing each other 3 times. You can't have them meet prior to a regional final. So that's also part of the bracketing thing. Reynolds said with the way this shook out, it actually wasn't that complicated this time around, but the Big 12 has so many good teams and moving parts. When we get to the actual tournament and Selection Sunday, it is going to be inevitable that a really good Big 12 team is not going to be given a region for the second weekend that is going to be geographically preferable because they're going to have to ship these teams to all of the regions, all of the parts of the country. Just keep that in mind. What else stands out to you, GP?
22 hours?
They got together on Monday, long day on Tuesday, a little more on Wednesday, and here we are.
That's outrageous. I could play 5 rounds. I could play 5 rounds of golf and then sit down and rank 16 teams. No problem. 22 hours is outrageous.
There's a process.
No, it's not that. It ain't a 22-hour process.
I'm just saying what I got, okay? 20 to 22 hours overall.
I'm not questioning the quote.
I know.
I'm laughing at the quote. I'm not questioning the validity of the quote. I'm hysterically laughing at it. 22 hours? I reached basically the same conclusion in 45 minutes. It's not that difficult. I'm with you. UCLA should be ahead of Arizona. And the reason is because of the loss column. They have similar records. They're both 4-loss teams. UCLA is 4-4 in quadrant 1, all 4 losses. That is on UCLA's resume, like you said, in quadrant 1. Arizona has 2 more quadrant 1 wins, but they got a quadrant 2 loss at Stanford and a quadrant 3 loss against Washington State. Now, I've heard some people say, yeah, maybe UCLA's got a better body of work, because the way I just laid it out to you, UCLA does have a better body of work. But Arizona beat UCLA. That's what somebody might say. So maybe that's a de facto tiebreaker. And if it is, whatever. What I would say there, the reason I don't get caught up on that too much is that's just a scheduling thing. That's just because the Pac-12 made UCLA go to Arizona before Arizona had to go to UCLA. If you just flip the schedule around, can we agree that UCLA probably, not definitely, but probably has a win over Arizona right now? So that's just a scheduling thing. Well, at least when I'm ranking teams, I try not to get too caught up in that. And you said something there that's interesting about, I want to make sure I get it right, about how Arizona's scheduled in the non-league. That's a factor.
He mentioned that as a factor.
I was just talking to our boss, Adi Joseph, about this last night. There is nothing I care about less when it comes to all of this stuff than non-league strength of schedule. I don't understand, and sincerely, if you've got an explanation, please enlighten me.
We do this every year, Parrish. We do this every year. This is supposed to be a short podcast. I can't.
How does the selection committee constantly tell everybody it's your entire body of work? We don't care what your conference record is. We don't care it's your entire body of work. They say it over and over and over again. And then they rationalize decisions by saying, well, they did something in their non-league schedule. I thought it was your whole body of work. If you want to talk about schedule strength, let's talk about total schedule strengths. But the idea that non-league, I do not believe, and I know that it is, but I do not believe non-league strength of schedule should ever factor into a decision.
Yeah, it still does. Right now, I'm not looking at the net ranking for I'm just looking at non-KenPom right now. Arizona is at 71 non-con schedule. UCLA was 135. It's not that great. I listen. It was a really quick interview, and I gave Chris like 5 or 6 questions, and that was just one of them because I couldn't help but notice
he didn't have time. He spent 22 hours doing the top 4.
That's right. That's right. So I know. When they get into these debates, though, there's a lot of different things that get brought up, and that's one of them. I don't think it's one that carries massive amounts of weight, at least not these days the way that it used to. However, I am a very, very big proponent of the committee literally acting as an arbiter and holding programs accountable, because I think it's better big picture for the entire sport. We want to have good teams play good teams as much as possible in November and December. And one of the forces to induce that to happening is how you seed teams when it comes to the tournament. If that wasn't in play, November and December would be even worse. So big picture, even outside of the scope of how you're seeding a team, I actually think the selection committee is a necessary, not even necessary evil, but a necessary force of pressure to induce programs to do this, because if it wasn't there, frankly, the sport in the first 6 weeks of the season would be even worse.
I hear you, but I guess my fundamental problem with that is that Houston and Gonzaga, just to name 2 big-time programs that play in not big-time leagues, should be scheduling way more aggressively in the non-league than, say, a Baylor or an Indiana or a Kansas or a Michigan State, because once that calendar flips to January, Kansas and Baylor got to play Big 12 schedules, and Michigan State and Indiana got to play Big 10 schedules, and Houston gets an AAC schedule, and Gonzaga gets a WCC schedule. Like, if you're going to reward programs for non-league schedule strength, that by default should lean toward schools in inferior conferences, because those are the ones, if they're legitimate, like top 30 type programs, just happen to play in not great conferences, those are the programs that should be scheduling way more aggressively than, say, if you're certainly a middle of the pack Big 12 or Big 10 program. So again, we've been over all this before. It's just one of the things I fundamentally, at my core, I think is a flaw in the whole selection process.
Okay, two more, then let's get out of here. We're trying our best to make this as fast as possible because this stuff is going to, it's just going to expire relatively quickly. Look at those regions, GP: South, Midwest, West, East. Which one do you think is the strongest?
I had not thought about this.
I'm going to read this aloud as GP thinks it. Here's your South: Bama, Baylor, Virginia, Indiana. The Midwest is Houston, Texas, Tennessee, Xavier. Out West is Kansas, Zona, K-State, Gonzaga. And then the East is Purdue, UCLA, Iowa State, Marquette.
Okay, I don't feel strongly about it, but if I had to pick one, Midwest.
I would lean South because you've got Bama, you've got Baylor, which would be my pick to be the most likely team to jump to the one line between now and Selection Sunday. Although, if Arizona doesn't lose again where it is right now, you'd think it would have a good chance. But Bama, Baylor, Virginia, who I think is Final Four capability. And then even though I disagree with Indiana on the 4 line and the best 4 overall, it's got one of the 5 best players in the country. We've seen how good it can be. Current result notwithstanding, it's actually tied. But you said Midwest. I would go South. You like the Midwest with the healthy Xavier. Tennessee's the best defensive team in the country. Texas has been in the conversation for top 3 Big 12 team. And then Houston is number 1 in the metrics. Why do you like the Midwest?
You've got Houston, which would be my pick today to win the national championship. You've got Texas, which has at times looked like the best team in the. There was a moment where people were saying Texas has got to be the best team in the. Texas should be ranked number 1. Texas has got to be the best team in the country. The Longhorns are tied for first in this moment while we're talking in the toughest league in America. Tennessee, like you said, they've got some big wins, right? They've beaten. Most notably the current number 1 Alabama, the overall number 1 seed Alabama. Shaky losses that I think ding up the resume. I would have Tennessee as a 4 seed instead of a 3, based on the loss column is problematic. But I still can recognize that on any given day, Tennessee can beat anybody. As I was texting last night with Adi again, I said Tennessee is capable of barely beating Houston or barely beating Houston Baptist. Like, they could barely beat either one of those schools, depending on how they play offensively on any given day. But like, that's a tough out, clearly. And then Xavier, yes, I want them to be healthy. With Zach Fremantle back in the lineup, but I think healthy Xavier is it's a legitimate Final Four contender too. Again, I don't feel strongly Midwest over any of these, but if I had to pick one, I think I'd pick Midwest.
Last one, then let's pull the parachute here. Of the 3 seeds you see here, because the 4 seeds obviously are vulnerable to drop out, and some of them will. Which 3 seed do you think is most likely to not be on the 1 through 4 line when we get to Selection Sunday? And the 3 seeds for those listening, trying to keep up, is Virginia, Tennessee, Iowa State, UCLA.
Tennessee. I think Virginia
drop out entirely. So you got them 5. The best chance of being a 5 or worse, just for so people are listening. Yeah.
Just for the sake of this conversation, I'm not predicting Tennessee is going to be a 5 or worse seed, but for the sake of this conversation, I think they are the most likely. Virginia, I think, is going to do fine the rest of the way in the ACC. Cue Virginia losing its next game, but I think Virginia is going to do fine in a weekend as ACC. The thing about the Big 12 threes, Kansas State and Iowa State, you can't take bad losses in the Big 12.
I know, but it's fair. But there's just so many of them.
I know, but you know what the committee just told us? They don't care. They don't care.
I've got Kansas State as my nominee. It's 6-6 in quad 1. It doesn't have a bad loss. I get that. It's just tallying the most. but you're right. How it actually comes to grips with how to seed these teams in the Big 12 that are just, it's quad one after quad one after quad one.
It's just
An endless line of them.
If you basically split your 2 games the rest of the week, it's just you get a quad 1 win and you take a quad 1 loss. I know that's not exactly true, but you get the point. So I think Virginia's going to be fine in the sense that I think Virginia's going to win the ACC, perhaps by multiple games. Those Big 12 schools, it's just hard unless they go on like 4-game losing streaks. It's hard to hurt yourself, which leaves me with Tennessee, which, by the way, as long as we're doing in progress stuff, down 16 right now at Kentucky. So if I had them as a 4 heading into the day, well, then they're sliding the other direction, losing to.
Great point, GP. I got that on my iPad right here, but I was monitoring Indiana. That's right. Tennessee's in a bad spot right now. It's not good. So I'm gonna be top-rated 3 seed, by the way.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go the other direction on the Vols. But we'll see. We still got plenty of time between now and Selection Sunday. I know not everybody loves these brackets. I like it. I like the attention it brings to the sport. I like the conversations that it sparks. I like the way it if I'm being honest, it more or less mostly validates the top 25 and 1. I'm glad the sport started doing this and doing it not on any network, but on America's most watched network, the Network of Stars.
All right, let's go watch these games.
Shouts to Devin Downey, shouts to Chester, South Carolina, shouts to Huck, shouts to Larnell, and shouts to Cody from Kentucky. I met Cody last night. I'll be real quick on it.
I thought it was a Sunday save, but go ahead.
I met Cody last night. I was so I'm in New York for like 11 straight days for doing Time to Shine and studio work. And rather than go home this weekend, because it would have been like go home late Friday, come back on Sunday, I just decided I'll stay the weekend and I'll fly my family up. So my mother's here and my wife is here and my 2 little guys are here. And my wife and my mother last night wanted to go to a Broadway play. They wanted to go see Jessica Chastain on A Doll's House. If you need a review, they said it was great. I said, you guys go do that. I'll take care of the boys tonight. I gave the boys every option of everything they wanted to do. And they said, we want to go to Dave & Buster's, Dad. We want to play video games at Dave & Buster's. Went to Dave & Buster's and we'd spend $200 playing games. Been there for like 3 hours. And I don't know if you know about how Dave & Buster's works, but at the end of it, you get all the
I'm familiar.
You earn all these tickets, and then you get to cash your tickets in for prizes.
And the value of these things are outrageous, by the way. Like, you think you get more than enough, and you're like, that's what I'm getting for this? Yeah.
Dude, okay, I legit spent $200 on games, and like the best thing we were getting is like a little rubber football. All right, that's where we were at.
Come on, it's one of the biggest scams going.
It's a massive scam. So my little guy Lou is starting to have a breakdown because he's got and here's the other thing. They put like an Xbox in this store, right? And so the kid's looking around and he's like,
need to literally buy the Dave & Buster's in order to get the Xbox. I think that's how that works.
I said, Lou, you have to spend $150,000 here to have enough tickets to get that Xbox. And he's starting to break down. He's starting to have a problem. And at this point, this young man, who I don't know, he looks over at me. He sees what's going on. My 9-year-old is happy and satisfied. My 6-year-old is unsatisfied with the entire situation. He had his eyes set on a brand new Xbox. This guy looks me right in the eyes. You know what he says? There's more of us. I said, excuse me, because I didn't really hear it. He said, GP, there's more of us than there are of them.
Hell yeah.
And I said, all right. And then he handed me his card with all his tickets on it. And he said, we're not going to spend these.
Wow. What a move.
Let your little guy get an extra prize. So shouts to Cody from Kentucky. I didn't expect to hear him. There's more of us than there are of them at the Dave & Buster's in Times Square on a Friday night. But that is what happened. Fun moment. Thank you guys for listening once again to the Ion College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere. Use it. Subscribe to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You know what to do at Apple. 5 stars, nice review. More of us. Cody's one of us. There's more of us than there are of them. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do that while you're here. And we're going to talk to you again on Sunday night after this whole weekend of whatever is in the books. Till then, take care.